All right, hello and welcome. I'm just going to do a quick sound check to make sure everything is working correctly. Brilliant. And in case you weren't wondering, I was playing with the DJI FPV drone before. I don't know if any of you have seen it turn on, but it's quite an interesting zombie droid looking thing. And we'll just do a light and sound check. So that's one of our testing drones, and a number of the time we'll get a drone we'll be able to do some tests on and see how they work. But let me just confirm that we have audio and visual. Brilliant, mic is working. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. So, as I mentioned, today is the second part of the GDSN. So, we're really happy to have you here. And again, we were collaborating on this event with the Association of Aerospace Industries Singapore, which we really appreciate. And we've enjoyed having some of their guests joining us for the event. So, let me go to my next slide here and make sure this is all working okay. So, welcome. We especially want to welcome some of the guests who are viewing, the speakers that we have lined up for tonight, of course, the speakers that we had yesterday, and of course, the Dronesec team that put some of this together. So, thank you very much. If you want some more resources and joining in the Slack group to continue the conversation after the event has occurred, you can do so with the link on the right, as well as the weekly threat intel newsletter, which we actually sent out just before the event started. So, what is the GDSN for you who maybe didn't join for last night's first start of the event? The aim is really to be a source of authority and standards for drone security around the world. We wanted to have a forum where we could collaborate, look at the bleeding edge, and really be able to discuss it in a Q&A sense, so we could extract kind of what is going on in terms of drone security. And of course, the mission here is to ensure safe and secure drone operations. We're all here. We all want to see the innovation of drones grow, and we want to prevent restrictions from occurring on the industry. Now, a key thing to know as well, everyone from the drone security guys, the counter drone guys, most of them are hobbyists or commercial drone guys themselves, and they appreciate using them. So we are for the future of drones, not against them. It's only the malicious ones that we're keyed in against. And just covering off the fact that, it is a community event. There are no sponsorships or costs to come and talk. It is free for everyone, and everything is live. And I'll get into a point about one of our speakers a little bit later as well. But the key thing about this GDSN was that, we're facing a bunch of threats, not just to friendly drone operations, but also to those facilities and perimeters from malicious drones. And so we're here to try and prevent and counter them. And there's a lot of collaboration needed from global organizations and law enforcement to tackle the problem. And in terms of yesterday, we had some of the manufacturers actually speak about data security and some of those privacy risks. And of course, counter drone systems face more and more effectiveness evaluation on how their systems work and how they interact with the environments that they exist in. So everyone gets together, has a bit of a chat about it, and that's the point of the GDSN. So hence why we have brought together speakers from different areas that will cover different parts of it. If you missed the first half yesterday, you can go and look at the recorded link. And the second half of those four speakers is, of course, tonight. So again, we're covering a wide spectrum of geography. We're starting in Australia, moving through Singapore, straight to Israel, covering South Africa, the UK, and France, and ending in the US. Now tonight, we're only capturing half of this global sphere, which is a good thing because last time we tried to do a stream of 9 hours straight, and it was quite brutal, both for us, the team, as well as the speakers. So we're a little bit glad that we split it between 2 days. So last night we covered the speakers from Ong Jinju, Antoine Meneni, Victor Villard, and Kim James. And tonight we have a few more speakers from Gabriel Bendheim, Ilker Aktaşoğlu, and Garrick Merkarian, followed by David Kovar for the keynote talk. Now, just a note on that. The talk by Ilker will not be published after the event, so it is live only. And we do ask that you don't record it in any kind of form, as it won't be present after the talk. So thanks in advance for abiding by that. A bit of housekeeping during the event. Obviously, this ends up being streamed in a few different places, but if you are watching from YouTube, you can use the comment section to ask the speakers during Q&A. And of course, if you're thanking them while they're leaving, you can leave a few clap hand emojis or whatever you feel like, given it's a virtual event. Now, if you want to find out more information about the speakers, see their slides, or any other kind of information, you can do so with the Show More button on the bottom of the description. And of course, if you want to reach out to any of the team during the event, you can do so via Slack, via email, or by the names on the bottom right-hand corner. Now, you may be wondering, who is Dronesec if you didn't watch the first day? Well, we're a cybersecurity and threat intel firm for the unmanned systems domain. So we do a lot of threat intelligence for drone incidents or potential threats to drones, as well as protecting the data security and privacy of drones within organizations or drone fleets. So the way we're able to hold this conference or GDSN is really behind the company. And we release a weekly UAV threat intel newsletter, which you might know of, or where most people come in as a particular interest. But we ourselves are separated between Melbourne, Sydney, and Singapore, and we do a variety of work throughout the global region. Now, the system or tool that has allowed the event to happen is Dronesec Notify. Of course, if you'd like to find out more, we can talk about it. But a lot of the speakers themselves currently use the platform, and it's how we got connected to them in the first place, finding out where drone incidents occur and what the next ones are going to look like and how to analyze those trends and kind of prepare for the next threat. And of course, for any of those attending, we have a special discount on the Dronesec training. This comes with the Dronesec operator's certificate, which has a coupon code, and so you'll be able to access it at a special price for the event only and join some of the students from those organizations you see in the top left-hand corner. So I won't keep speaking for too long because we want to get Gabriel almost prepped and ready to go, but just a last thank you, especially for joining in and for the organizers that have helped put this together. Now, when it comes to the speakers, we have some speakers returning for a second time, which we really appreciate, and it's always great having them on. So thank you to those who are returning. Thank you for the first-time speakers. And again, thank you to the Association of Aerospace Industries Singapore for joining us to partner with this event. Now, this is the last day, so when we get to the end of it, we do ask that you go and fill in that feedback form to kind of infer what we're going to do the next time or how we can make it better. So that's it from me. And I'm going to get Gabriel up on screen where he will start sharing his screen and almost kick off with his talk. So let's get him up here. All right. Hello, Gabriel, I can hear you. How are you doing?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
I can indeed. It's all working fine. Your screen will appear in a few seconds, and I'll let you take off. But very welcome to the GDSN for the first time from D-Fend. It's a pleasure to have you, and we look forward to your presentation.
Pleasure to be here.
All right. You can go ahead and start with your talk. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Pleasure to meet you. My name is Gabriel from D-Fend, and I'm here to talk about cyber counter-drone concepts for control and continuity in challenging environments. We at D-Fend Solutions, we provide our counter-drone solutions aimed specifically for the sensitive environments to provide complete situational awareness and control over the drone threats. A little bit about our product and about who we are and where we are dispersed around the world. We are a global company with global offices worldwide. At the moment, we're providing our solution to a wide range of various customers from various domains and various defense sectors, whether in the sector of defense, homeland security, private enterprises, and we protect large-scale events and sensitive airspaces worldwide. And this is where I want to really put an emphasis on, because you had various speakers yesterday, and you will have more speakers today talk about drone technology and where drones are going and how their technology is advancing, and the amount of different applications that drones are being used in today. So I don't need to talk too much about that, but we know that the drones are everywhere and that their technology is advancing to a degree where they could be used to pose as a risk, whether by terrorists or criminal activities, so drones used maliciously, or just drones used carelessly by careless users that can cause harm in various domains. And what I want to put an emphasis on today are the challenging environments or the sensitive environments in airspaces where if these drones pose as a risk, it is a lot more complex to counter that threat. A, to provide the situational awareness for the operators using counter-drone solutions. And secondly, and more importantly, how do we neutralize that risk? And not only how do we neutralize it, but how can we neutralize it while maintaining operational continuity or maintaining safety in the environment of what we wish to protect. And that leads me to the next slide, where I'm going to talk about the ideal counter-UAS solution for challenging environments, as I think it may be. And that is a full-spectrum counter-UAS solution that does everything as an end-to-end system, from detecting the rogue drone in the environment, tracking its movements, classifying its make and model, providing you with extra situational awareness as to perhaps pilot's position or takeoff location of that drone, painting a full picture for the counter-UAS system operator. And moreover, if that operator sees that drone or those drones in plural pose as a risk to the operational environment or to the environment of which we wish to protect, we have the ability to safely take control over that drone, disconnect the rogue UAS or the rogue drone from its original pilot, and move it over and land it safely at a predefined safe zone of the counter-UAS solutions or system operator's choice. And that's very important, and that's the ideal counter-UAS solution in D-Fend's mind, is in terms of cyber takeover, we're not only providing the accurate location of that drone, or if you may, look at the screen whereas we're painting a dome of protection over an environment, we see the drone's movements and we have the ability to fully take control over that drone while using cyber takeover technology. And we can do that safely. And the immediate benefits of that is that as that solution is surgical, it is non-jamming, so I'm doing that without interfering with the operational environment. I'm not using any kinetic solution, so I'm not sending anything physical out into the air, and I'm not dependent on line of sight. And that, in my mind, is the ideal counter-UAS solution for a challenging environment, because not only can we paint a full picture and have that situational awareness provided, but we also have the ability to neutralize the threat, mitigate the risk by taking full control over the rogue drone and landing it safely, all while maintaining operational continuity by not jamming, not sending any kinetic solutions into the air, and not being dependent on line of sight. The next slide is going to go a little bit into detail about the specific capabilities or the necessary capabilities for control and safety across the rogue drone incident lifecycle. So if the previous slide was just painting that picture in a macro point of view, this slide, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into each specific part of the life cycle or each specific aspect in terms of the capabilities that are relevant in order to provide a full counter-UAS solution. And the first thing that a counter-UAS solution working off of RF Cyber is going to need to do is to detect the risk and to provide the system operator with an alert. Now, though this is an educated audience, it's going to be pretty easy to explain how it works. Lots of times when I'm talking to different customers, we have to really go into the basics of things. But in terms of UAS operation or drone operation, there's a ground control station and there's a drone, and usually they have a unique communication line between them. RF detection and cyber technology solutions would detect that RF between the drone and the remote control, and it's going to provide the operator with an alert telling the operator, hey, there's a drone communication in your operational environment. Moreover, through that dedicated line of communication between an RC and its drone, lots of information is being sent in both ways. The ground control station is what's telling the drone to fly up, fly down, fly left, fly right, and the UAS or drone is sending lots of information back to its remote controller. RF cyber technology utilizes that line of communication and extracts crucial information from that line of communication. We focus on extracting the information, or RF cyber technology can focus on extracting the information that's relevant, such as the live GPS location of the drone. So not only are we detecting that there's drone technology in the vicinity and providing the operator with an alert, these technologies have the ability to extract the live GPS location that the drone is sending as remote control, decodes the information and displays it for the system operator on the user interface. That way, we're detecting the drone communication, providing the operator with an alert, and also receiving the live GPS location of that drone, tracking its movements live in GPS accuracy. In addition, now that we know that there's a drone out there and we know its exact live position and the distance from perhaps what we defined as the area of protection, it's important to also gain more and more information about that UAS in order to provide situational awareness as to what the system operator is dealing with. Information such as the identity of that drone. Not only are we providing, or can RF Cyber Solutions provide you with the make and model of a specific drone, say not only that it's this type of communication operating on so-and-so frequency, but we're also letting the system operator know, hey, there's a Phantom 4 Pro or a Mavic 2 Enterprise or Parrot Anafi in your environment, or a do-it-yourself drone model that's out there. RF cyber technology also has the ability to provide its own unique identification to each drone. And in that case, say you have 10 of the same drones out in your vicinity or out in your operational environment of the same make and model, RF cyber technology has the ability to provide its own unique identifier to each drone. That way, although you have, say, 10 of the same drones in your environment, you're able to distinguish between each one, which enables the RF cyber technology operator to perhaps authorize a specific drone, right? We can create a list, say, of authorized drones and unauthorized drones, although they're from or of the same make and model. This is very important for many different operational domains and security, as well as private enterprises, say an airport that has their own security drones or own drones that they are using for maintenance, and the RF cyber technology operator would want to categorize or classify those drones as authorized, whereas any other drone, although they're from the same make and model, which hasn't been authorized, will be mitigated or neutralized upon entering the predefined protected area, or just manually neutralized and mitigated by the system operator. In addition to then providing the operator with detection of the rogue drone, as well as its live location, as well as the make and model, and perhaps also classify it as an authorized or unauthorized drone, RF cyber technology provides system operators with crucial information, such as the takeoff position of the drone. And in some cases, also the RC position, the live remote control position. So say a rogue drone pilot would take off from a specific location and then make his or her way to a different environment, perhaps to hide away from the original home point. RF cyber technology can provide both of those locations to the Counter-UAS solution operator, thus painting a full situational awareness picture for the operator of detecting the rogue drone or rogue drones, providing the operator with their live location, classifying the make and model of those drones in the environment, and providing information such as the takeoff position as well as the remote control location. And then the system operator can decide what he or she wants to do with the environment. If they see that these drones or these rogue drones pose as a risk or as a threat to the operational environment, RF cyber technology can then move over to the other part of the neutralization or drone mitigation. Again, all in the same end-to-end solution. One sensor provides you with that full scale or full spectrum of capabilities. We can then move over to mitigate or neutralize the risk. And as you can see on your screen, it's important to provide multiple scalable options for drone or threat mitigation. Okay, you can begin with just an option to disconnect the drone pilot. So we see that drone in the environment, we see that it poses as a risk, or we see the multiple drones in the environment, see that all of them pose as a risk. we can then proceed to mitigate. And when a system operator of RF cyber technology would select to neutralize a drone in the environment, the system sends a surgical command signal to a specific drone to disconnect from its original remote control. And then the scalable options of mitigation would be just to fend off the drone, just to remain in that disconnecting phase. Again, I'm reminding that it's surgical and it's non-jamming. I'm communicating specifically to the rogue drone. We can disconnect it from its pilot, and then the drone is going to conduct its fail-safe mechanisms, whether it would return home or hover and land in place. An addition option to the scalable capabilities of drone mitigation and neutralization would be to force the drone to go back to its original home point and land at home. Thus, the pilot is not going to regain control when the drone comes closer to his or her vicinity. Rather, the drone is just going to go back to its original takeoff position and land safely. Again, keeping the protected environment under control. And last but not least, the RF cyber technology operator can move over to fully take control over that drone. So we're not just going to disconnect it from its original pilot, and we're not going to leave it by sending it back home. Rather, the RF cyber technology operator can moreover reprogram that drone with new waypoints to land at a predefined safe location of his or her choosing. And that's the full capability set of RF cyber technology, from detecting the rogue drone, providing the live GPS location of that drone, classifying its make and model, having the ability to classify it as an authorized or unauthorized drone, being provided awareness as to where the drone came from, where its pilot is, and having the ability to safely mitigate the risk and neutralize the threat, either by sending it back to its original home location or by reprogramming it to fly waypoints to a newly safe, predefined safe landing zone of the system operator's choosing, thus providing with full operational safety in the operational environment and maintaining complete control over the drone. I'm going to move over and discuss traditional technologies and how those traditional technologies, although operated very, very well, may struggle and have shortcomings when operated in challenging or in sensitive environments. And those original technologies or traditional technologies that are used in the realm of detection are technologies such as radars, optical solutions, RF direction finders, and acoustic solutions in some cases. Now, we love those technologies. They're traditional, we're used to them, and we know that they work. However, they work well in some environments, but when talking about sensitive environments or challenging environments, whether it's dense urban environments or environments with obstructions, we know that they have their limitations. Okay, traditional technologies such as radars or acoustic solutions suffer from false positives or RF refractions in some cases, whereas it has the problem with distinguishing between the different flying objects in the vicinity. And if caused with RF reflection, the radars are going to provide the system operator with many alerts, although not all from the same specific drone that's out there in the vicinity. Moreover, traditional detection technologies such as optical solutions would have problems working in areas which are non-line of sight, or would have problems with bad weather in specific locations. So we know that those traditional technologies, however great they may be in some environments, dealing in more challenging environments such as urban areas or dense urban environments, would have trouble detecting the rogue drone, either by false positives or just trouble handling the non-line of sight in the environment. The next category would be traditional technologies in the realm of mitigation. These traditional technologies can be technologies such as RF control jamming and RF and GPS jamming. In addition, traditional technologies would be, for mitigation, would be those of kinetic solutions. They could be net throwers, they could be drones that go and catch drones or that ram into other drones, and they can be high energy devices, laser and microwave devices that burn the drones while in midair. And again, those technologies are great and they work. However, in some environments or in sensitive environments or challenging environments, say, I don't know, if you're an airport and you want to protect your airspace, or if you're at a mega event in a stadium or a mega sporting event, using these traditional mitigation technologies could pose as a bigger risk than the drone itself that's in the vicinity. Since traditional radio control and GPS jamming are going to cause signal disruption. Now, we know that that's very effective in terms of disconnecting the drone from its pilot. Thus, the drone is going to conduct its failsafe, which also can be a risk at times. We know that in sensitive and challenging environments, we can't always conduct these jamming solutions, right? In addition, kinetic solutions would be great for catching a drone, but it has the risk of causing collateral damage. If I'm shooting down a drone, I got to make sure that that drone is going to land safely, or else it's just scary to not know what's going to happen with that drone if it falls down on a crowd of people, or if it's going to fall in an area or drop in an area where it's going to cause more damage than we aim to prevent. And that was a little bit about traditional technologies, and however great they may be, it's just to show that they have their own shortcomings when operating counter-UAS solutions in urban environments, in sensitive environments, and operationally challenging environments. That's why sensitive environments requires the next generation approach, or the RF cyber approach, in terms of drone takeover, where in the detection realm of the situation, the outcome is going to be fast and accurate detection. By utilizing the RF channel, we're going to detect that RF communication by extracting crucial information and specific information, validating that that RF signal that has been detected is that of a drone. We're creating fast and accurate detection with no false positives. In addition, by depending on the RF communication link, you're not dependent on line of sight. However helpful that the line of sight may be, it's not completely dependent as those of optical solutions where we would actually need the line of sight with the UAS. Using RF cyber technology, line of sight may help for gaining more range, but you're not dependent on that line of sight for detecting the rogue drone in your environment. And in the realm of mitigation, the RF cyber is going to keep a safe environment by safely disconnecting the specific drone from its specific remote controller pilot, and then having the ability to reprogram that drone with new waypoints to a new safe landing zone. Thus, the original drone pilot's going to be disconnected from the UAS. That UAS has been successfully reprogrammed and is safely flying a predefined safe route to a safe landing zone, thus providing sensitive airspace protection while maintaining that operational continuity. We know that in cyber takeover, while ensuring that operational continuity, we know that that's key for continuing in the realm of communications, transportation, commerce, everyday life. We need to provide that safety, that situational awareness of what's happening in our operational deployment environment, and B, providing with that safety to maintain operations while neutralizing the drone threat surgically and safely, how important that is for maintaining operations across all domains, whether it's the defense sector that need to maintain their operational continuity by maintaining their communications or not disrupting their communications. Moreover, in airport domains or critical infrastructures where, again, they cannot disrupt signal communications, GPS communications in the environment, or just commercial everyday life where neutralizing the threat in traditional manners is going to be a problem if it's not done safely and surgically while maintaining control over the threat in all steps of the process. And that's the first part of the presentation that talks about the solution of cyber RF takeover in terms of that full spectrum, end-to-end operational solution for detection, tracking, classification, providing crucial information such as takeoff position and RC location, while enabling with the same sensor and in the same solution to neutralize and mitigate the threat surgically and safely, whether for a single drone or for multiple drones in the operational deployment environment. Now, let's talk a little bit about all the different types of drones that are out there, right? And the biggest limitation that an RF cyber takeover solution is going to have is, of course, its library of drones. So we know that there's all different types of drones that are being flown out there, whether it's the commercial high-endurance drones, those drones that can fly long ranges, maintain great communication between the ground control station and that of the drone, high video quality, can fly long distances, and the larger of those UASs can also carry substantial payloads. There's a whole other sector of the do-it-yourself drone market of having that flight controller, pairing it with telemetry radio models, and building it on your own frame that you constructed from scratch. That's a whole other domain of UASs that are out there. In addition, they are the smaller, more consumer-based Wi-Fi drones, some of them with great extended Wi-Fi capabilities, and we're seeing more and more of those drones come out to date. And some of those smaller, I would say, low-endurance drones that are used for different cases and different measures sometimes. But all of them are out there, and all of those drones can be used to cause risk, and they could be a threat in the different operational domains in the different sectors. RF cyber technology has a limitation of library-based solutions. That's why it's crucial for vendors of such technologies to focus on which of those technologies they want to implement and how they can provide a robust library with the crucial UASs that are out there in the market. And it's important to constantly research and analyze the drone market, see what drones that are out there, which drones are used for malicious attempts, and statistically seeing which ones are out there and which ones have been used. In addition, to see which the best-selling drones are out there, or to see the different shifts and trends out in the market in order to implement and upgrade the RF cyber library with the most crucial drones that are out there. And that we know today that there's commonly supported drones that are very or relatively easy to implement into an RF cyber technologies supported drones library. But I would say customers out there need to take into consideration that if they're searching for that RF cyber technology, they have to search for an RF cyber technology that also deals with the major threats, the high endurance drones that are out there in the market, the do-it-yourself drones that are out there in the market, the ones that can fly long distances, the ones that can carry heavy payloads, and that the ones that are most likely to be used in malicious activities are the ones that, if used carelessly, would cause the most amount of damage. Because RF cyber, although perfect in many domains, if you have a drone flying out there, it could be 10 feet away from the sensor. But if it's not implemented in the drone's library, the system is going to be completely blind to the fact that there's a drone being flown out there. And that's why unique differentiators and vendors that are providing these RF cyber solutions are differentiating in their libraries as to supporting the capabilities that we mentioned before of detecting the drone, locating its exact position, classifying the drone make and model, having the ability to uniquely tag a drone as an authorized or unauthorized drone, providing information as its takeoff position or RC location, in addition to providing the ability to safely mitigate and neutralize the threat by disconnecting the pilot and reprogramming that drone to fly a safe route to a predefined safe landing zone. And it's crucial to differentiate between the different drones that are out there on the market and to select an RF cyber solution with the biggest amount of drones that are relevant for each customer out there in terms of the threat environment that they are facing. In addition, it's important to mention that with RF cyber technology, what's relevant today may change tomorrow and may not be relevant tomorrow. And that's why it's crucial to continuously provide updates and upgrades to the system with the new and emerging threats that are out there. We see that new drones are coming to the market every day, and it's crucial that those drone technologies be implemented into the supported drones library as soon as possible. And that's why it's important for Counter-UAS RF cyber technology vendor to continuously research the market, analyze the market, anticipate the new emerging threats, and proactively build the solution to meet the next generation threat or the threat that's yet to come. In addition, it's important to have the RF cyber technology enabled to integrate with external control systems. We know that the drone threat is increasing, and the regulations in the world of utilizing UAS in the environment, whether it's with line of sight or BVLOS or beyond visual line of sight, we know that UAS traffic management systems are being deployed and are being implemented to use to date. In addition, such technologies that drone pilots may be required to use, such as providing their drone with a UUID, so that these UAS traffic management systems could have a good situational awareness of the environment. It doesn't provide that full hermetic solution in terms of drones that will not be registered or listed. So it is important to have the RF cyber technology enabled to integrate with these control systems, or these global control systems and international control systems, in order to provide that full situational awareness of both those registered drones as well as the drones or UASs that are not registered, or what we can call them rogue drones in the environment, thus providing those UTM systems with full situational awareness of what's happening in the environment. In addition, RF cyber technology, as perfect as it may be, and why we think, or I think, it's the ideal technology for challenging and sensitive environments, it's not perfect, and it needs to have the ability to be integrated and implemented into multi-layered defense technologies as well. So to have the ability to combine this RF cyber technology solution with additional technologies in order to provide that hermetic solution is crucial. That leads me to the final slide of cyber takeover core concepts to ensure operational continuity and safety in an operational deployment environment will be that of full control. The system operator would need to have the ability to provide full control over the operational deployment environment. And the best way to provide that control is to not only detect and provide situational awareness about what's happening in terms of the drones flying in the operational deployment environment, but to also have the ability to safely take control over that drone and land it. And that's why the next category would be providing that safety of a safe landing zones or multiple safe landing zones, in order for us to have that control as to where the drone is going to make its way after it has been neutralized. In addition, it's crucial to focus on the drone market and to, I would say, research and analyze and implement the correct drone technologies as soon as possible, and to anticipate the upcoming threats in order to implement it into the supported drone library of the RF cyber technologies and solutions. And always look to the future, see what the new developing technologies that are out there, anticipate the threat, implement the ability to counter those threats in order to continually provide that operational continuity while providing safety in all the different domains and vectors that are out there. And that's it for my presentation and my slides. I hope I didn't go over time. And I would love to hear any questions that you have about the presentation, about RF cyber technology, about operational continuity, or just anything that's on your minds for that matter.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Gabriel. Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
All right, we do have a few questions that have come in. Some of the comments are from Facebook, Twitter. We had some come in through Slack, and 2 on YouTube. So we may end up having a bit of a podcast back and forth about it. So let's see how we go in terms of time. The first one says, with some countries or militaries requiring an optical identification before they can issue the order to defeat the drone, is your system modular, allowing extra assets to work alongside it?
Absolutely, and that's a great question. And that was the last slide that I was, or the one before the last slide, was actually saying how important it is to integrate, or to have the ability to integrate with existing counter-UAS solutions and technologies. Those would be technologies such as radars, optical solutions, acoustic solutions, because at least I know that lots of our customers, and I'm just going to talk in a general sense of the I would say security domain. Some of the domains, as the question, they cannot conduct any active measures or neutralizing measures without having a visual of the object as well. And that's why it's very, very important to have the RF cyber technology integrated or have the ability to be integrated to existing technologies, because RF cyber technology can provide the precise lat-long or MGRS of that UAS flying in the vicinity, thus enabling the optical solution to easily focus on the target up to its capacity and capabilities. Some optical solutions can go out to as far as 2 kilometers. I don't really know in miles. I speak in kilometers. I hope you do as well. So up to 2 kilometers in terms of detecting small UASs, such as, I would say, small DIYs, but an equivalent to Mavic Mini or the Mavic Pro or Mavic 2, which is a relatively small drone, the Parrot Anafi as well, that's out there, Skydio's drones, the Aotel Evo, up to 2 kilometers. But it's crucial to have that precise lat-long or MGRS of that UAS in order for the optical solution to focus and target that drone as soon as possible and as swiftly and quickly as possible.
Okay, brilliant. And I guess that's almost a segue to the next question, which was someone who said, thank you again for the presentation. My question for you is, this cyber approach you're using fully applicable for all sorts of UAS? For example, drones, UAV fixed wings, fully customized UAS, and I guess I'll add in there, your old RC planes and helicopters.
Absolutely. So whether it's a quadcopter, VTOL, or if it's a fixed wing solution, for that matter, if it's transmitting and we're able to detect that RF emission, we're able to extract the crucial information and decode it, the flight controller and the radio models can be deployed on a VTOL, on a fixed wing, or on a vehicle, or any type of vehicle that it may be. What the RF cyber solution is detecting, it's the RF emissions of that drone or of the RC or some type of RF emission. We're detecting that emission, we're extracting crucial information or specific data packets that are relevant, decoding that, bypassing the encryption. All right, we're not, or RF cyber technology to decrypt information live. It's quite an approach, but there's different abilities and there's different ways how to bypass encryptions in order to extract the crucial information swiftly and rapidly, display that information to the user on the user interface, thus providing that crucial situational awareness to move over to neutralize the threat. And to answer the question again, it doesn't matter as to the platform, as well as or as long as the protocol or the RF protocol and the emissions have been implemented into the RF Cyber's library.
Okay, it's funny. I think you're talking about some of the things here that we have questions right on. So I'll continue with another segue, and that is, I'm worried that these methods you're talking about make use of private backdoors or unknown exploits that you have. What's to stop a private person from using this? Actually, and just to maybe frame that, you're talking about the bypass of encryption. So yeah, maybe you can touch on that in this question.
Right. So I think if I'm not mistaken, the question was also towards the RF cyber technology vendors, right? How do we stop, I would say, malicious actors for hacking into our system? So there's pretty smart people that are involved in creating and deploying these solutions. And the fact of the matter is that they know how to decrypt the systems from external malicious activities while still managing to exploit the correct information of the UASs itself. But I'm going to touch on the privacy aspect of it, and it's a big aspect that it's important to focus on and to address in terms of RF cyber technology, because privacy, it's a big subject, and it is important to avoid private, I would say, matters such as the video link, right? So perhaps you can avoid privacy by not, I would say, intercepting or detecting or decoding the video link, rather just the telemetry of the drone as to where its location is. And if it then crosses over into a restricted environment where the customer, all right, whatever the customer may be, and depending on the different vectors or deployment environments, let's say they have the authorization to neutralize the threat actively, then they can conduct that safe mitigation to take control over that drone and land it safely at a predefined safe zone. But if there's no authority to mitigate the risk or to neutralize the threat, that's why it's important to have that full situational awareness of not only where the drone is, but where the takeoff position is, so you can then send a tactical solution, or say just I would say just a patrol vehicle to tell the pilot to ma'am, sir, you cannot be flying your drone in this environment. Please stop, without, causing any harm or, taking anybody to justice. But you can also do that as well with kinetic solutions, depending on the vector again, and depending on the deployment environment.
Okay, and just a quick one there on what you said. Does your system include siphoning off the visual data in terms of seeing what the camera or the pilot can see? Is that part of your solution or no?
So let's talk specifically about defense solutions. I'll keep it in generals. I mean, our solution specifically does not. We avoid that private information, such as the video link. I can give the customer, the drone. I'll reprogram it, land it safely, and just say, do as you please with that drone. You want to reverse engineer it. You want to take out the SSID, anything you want to do with that drone. But my system avoids that. Other RF cyber technologies out there may want to take that into consideration as to how they want to exploit the data, what data they want to exploit, and what data they want to detect and intercept as per different privacy and regulations that are out there. And it is very important to take that domain into consideration when operating in the counter drone solution arena, because it's difficult. They're out there. Drones are being used for various sorts of applications just by simple, innocent users as well as malicious actors. And the regulations and the compliance and that whole environment has to be taken into consideration. And the Counter-UAS solution vendors need to keep that in mind. They need to provide a full end-to-end solution, but that can also be scalable and that can also comply with the different regulations, whether the transmission regulations or that of taking possession of somebody's property as well.
Okay, yeah, great answer, and thanks for going into depth there about the why or the why not. Another question here, if you don't mind, we're kind of just shooting these at you, but there's a few of them. So that's good. The question is, what technology is behind your RF cyber method? Isn't it the RF detection method? Does it use several methods simultaneously? And at the end it says which ones?
I'm going to avoid discussing things that may be intellectual property, but in general, to go over again, we're detecting the RF that's being transmitted by the RC or by the UAS out there in the vicinity. To detect RF is pretty simple. You need an ultra-wideband receiver that operates on all known drone frequencies. That also has to be taken into consideration by a customer. An RF cyber technology that could provide that full spectrum of all known drone frequencies, as well as also frequencies that have been shifted from the regular ISM bands to operate, roguely outside of those ISM bands as well. The next layer would be, now that I've detected that RF emission, how do I validate that emission does actually belong to a drone and not just something of the likelihood of a drone, in order to avoid those falses and to detect a true drone that's in the vicinity? That's the next level. And the other level beyond that would be to extract crucial data, such as the GPS packet, and able to extract that information, to decode it in order to provide that precise lat-long or MGRS of the drone itself, or the precise GPS location of the drone. Other information such as unique identifiers and how an RF cyber vendor would utilize those unique identifiers are extremely intellectual property, in addition to, of course, the whole mitigation aspect as to how does one reprogram a drone. It's all done via RF signals and commands, but the methods behind it, of course, is intellectual property.
Yeah, the secret sauce that allows the competition to happen. So
no problem there. You gotta make money. You gotta make money in the business.
That's right. So look, we probably have just time for maybe 2 more questions. So this next one said, actually, this one was a quick one. It said, what did the second last slide mean by open architecture?
Open architecture, basically it means that you can provide an API to external sources where you can just, you can share your solution with already existing customers out there, because many of the customers have their traditional technologies and they're already using their security measures. I don't know many customers that are going to say, oh my God, you guys are awesome. I'm throwing everything that I've been spending millions of dollars on for the past X amount of years. I'm going to throw it into the trash and just use you guys. So you want to have the ability to integrate your solution into their already existing technologies that they're using, while providing your API so they can extract the information from your system And then if they have their own UIs or their own management systems, they can just receive the information that the RF cyber technology is providing and display it in any way that's easiest. Although the RF cyber technology vendors or defense solutions for that matter, we try to provide a very easy, user-friendly interface to swiftly and rapidly detect, locate, track, classify, and mitigate the drone threat. There are existing technologies that are out there that are very set in their ways and they want to use their already existing solutions. You have to provide an open API. In addition, you also want to have the ability to provide the correct information and scalable information to the UAS traffic management UTM systems that are rapidly growing and being more and more or that are implementing themselves or implemented today, so that vice versa you can feed off of each other and to provide that full situational awareness in the domain of registered UAS as well as rogue UASs to maintain safety and operational continuity in different environments.
Yeah, brilliant. And look, there's a few more comments that kind of came in via YouTube itself, and I'll maybe let you answer them in the comments because we've only got time for one more. But it was quite an interesting one. It said, you talked about applying a unique identifier per drone as good or bad drones. How long is this remembered for in the history, and are there ways this could potentially be spoofed?
There are ways around it. It's very difficult, but the system, or our system from that matter, since I'm not just generally speaking anymore, but I'll talk about our solution since the questions are specifically for the solution, they have the ability to classify a drone as authorized or unauthorized because our solution receives unique identifiers for each drone. Once I classify a drone as an authorized drone, it's going to continually be classified as authorized until selected otherwise by the system operator. There are ways around that since we're receiving unique identifiers in specific ways because each drone in RC has a specific link. If a drone would select a different RC, depending on the type and model, perhaps it's going to receive a new unique identifier, and then it's going to have to be reauthorized. But once a drone has been authorized and it stays the same, it's going to continually be authorized until the system operator selects otherwise.
Awesome. Well, Gabriel, thank you so much for coming to the GDSN, giving a talk and answering the influx of questions. So appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll see you another time on GDSN.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
All right. For everyone else, we'll be taking 7 minutes, and we'll be back then for the next speaker, Ilker, for his talk. Thank you and goodbye. All right, we are back live with Garrick. And Garrick, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, or good night, whenever you are.
That's right. It's not as late as last time when we were up until about 3 or 4 a.m. But it's a decent time of night. So, look, appreciate you having you here because the Dronesec team has read your book that you co-authored, obviously with Andrew Staniforth, and the book is from Artec House, Countermeasures for Aerial Drones. We've got it sitting on our shelf, and we highly recommend it as well. And when we found out that you were able to speak as well,
Thanks for
we're really excited. So, yeah, do you want to take it away? And your slides are ready to share. We thank you for having you. We know you've only got about half an hour, so I'll let you kick off with the presentation. And if we have questions afterwards, we'll get into them.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Just the first question. Can you see my screen? Hello? Hello?
Thank you. We can see your screen.
Can you? So I'm not sure if you can see my screen.
Hey, Garrick, we can see your screen and we can hear you, so you can go back to present it. Sorry for that hiccup there. Yes, it's perfect. Go ahead.
Okay. So again, on behalf of myself and Andrew, I would like to thank you for inviting. It's both pleasure and honor to be here. And I hope I already took something useful from the previous presentation, and I hope you guys can find something useful in ours. The first, who we are, where we are. So I've talked of myself. I'm Gabriel Merkarian. I have a pleasure of being professor of communication at Lancaster University, but also the founder and the chairman of Renicom Limited. It's a UK company. I'm sure you already had a lot of discussions about the drones, how they've been used, how they could be used, and what security threats they are possessing. I will not be talking about this. I will say what we think about it. And we, as a company, as Renicom, we are in the counter-UAS sector for the last 4 or 5 years. We focus purely on the optical detection, tracking, and classification of sensors. And this is basically to utilize our expertise in visual analytics and artificial intelligence. And why the optical? Because as we know, all the sensors are important, and you cannot solve the problem with just one sensor. Everyone agrees what you need to have a multiple of sensors to complement each other. But the final decision is like a last mile in communications. You need to have an optical system to see the drone, to identify, to classify, and to do forensic investigation after that. So I just took 2 quotes what we used before. Conventionally, everyone thinks well, the optical system is just a camera, and what you need a radar or the RF detection to detect the drones, and then once you detect, you point manually such a camera into and zoom it into the drone, which was the case until recently, but not anymore. The problem started when people started deploying the anti-drone systems. They realized what the illegal drones, they don't fly very often, but what you need to have a 24/7 operator sitting and looking to the sky and manually pointing the system all over. So then there came a requirement to have this automated. And this is where we came. So we, as a company, we introduced basically AI-based systems with the optical detection. And in our system, we take the AI, artificial intelligence, to control the systems rather than the operators. And the human operators only come to the equation when the drone is classified as the rogue drone or the dangerous drone, and the decision needs to be made what kind of countermeasure to engage. Should it be the jammer or the sniper or kinetic or the eagle or whatever? So what we did, we introduced the system, which just one of the systems, which called the Sky Patriot. It's patented. And the system, from what we believe, it's quite advanced. A lot of people tell us what they're one of the best on the market. And it is proven by the numerous installations. Our system is installed in some really critical installations. I can say what it's installed in Heathrow Airport. I also can say what it's installed in a number of prisons, in the military bases, and it also installed in the Far East as well. So it's quite well accepted system. The performance, what we are getting with the standard Bosch cameras, as you can see, is about 1.8 kilometers for classification and 3 kilometers for the detection. But if you use the better and more expensive cameras, obviously the range will increase accordingly. And this is just a simple diagram showing what it's not just a camera, but there is a lot of behind it, including like the multiple modules and analytics. So I won't go into the details. I just simply show what we can do. So, for example, we on the left-hand side, where you see like trees and everything, that's the test area what we are using. On this screen, you can see the drone, which is a Target 94, but we also can see our like the birds and some movements on the trees and so on. So the system detects the drones, but it ignores the other moving target. Then we have a classifier, which is on the right-hand side. And then the result of classification, we see the target. It's classified as a drone, and it's plotted on a map. We also can do the birds. So we can detect and classify the birds, which is quite important for many airports as well. And we can detect and classify the drones and the birds at the same time. So we can give like a pretty accurate information about who is who flying in the protected area. And our latest result, also what we can do, like while everyone is interested to find the drones, then for making decision what countermeasure to apply, it will be good to know what this drone is carrying. If it is just a camera, it's one thing. And I always say, in some cases you want to hide from the camera, but in some cases you come out, and if it's a paparazzi drone and you are desperate for publicity, you may come out. But you really want to know if your drone is carrying something, like in the videos from the previous presentation. And today, to the best of our knowledge, there is no system what can say what this is a rogue drone and this is carrying the dangerous goods. We actually have the new addition to our solution, which is a payload detection. And it's not just simply zooming camera to the drone and to see if it's carrying anything. Again, with the help of AI, we analyze the drone movements. And by comparing with the movements of loaded drone or with unloaded drone, we cannot say what it is carrying because it's impossible. It's inside the box. But we can say and predict, estimate the weight of the payload, what the drone is carrying, which is useful in making the decisions. One thing what I also wanted to talk today is, in the past few years, there were a lot of discussions about the counter-UAV systems and how it is important and so on and so forth. And today, I personally know about 220 to 130 systems from about 150 suppliers who provide the different counter-UAV systems for different applications. The problem is, as there is no single use, there is also no single kind of type of application. And there is always starts the question, say, for whom you are developing your system, who is your end user? Because the different end users have the different requirements. Obviously, if you are protecting military base, in one requirement, if you're protecting the musical festival in the summer, it's another requirement. And if you're protecting your personal yacht in the Caribbean or somewhere, it's another requirement. So we came to the problem what actually it's not what important to design the drone, but it's a counter-UAV system, but it's important to design the counter-UAV system, specific counter-UAV system for specific user. And as a result, we talked to a few partners in Europe, and we've been successful in obtaining a project and the R&D grant from the European Union. And the project is called the DroneWise. And the aim of the grant is actually to engage with the end users, with the law enforcement agencies. In some cases, advise them what to do. In some cases, to learn from them what they want so the system could meet their requirements, and to put together some sort of a plan and a product which will help them to deal with the counter-UAV systems more efficiently. And it says here, though, the aim of this DroneWise is significantly improve the security of public spaces by enhancing cooperation and coordination between the first responder agencies. And the objectives of this project are listed here. And it's quite a few of these objectives. And we started with the analysis of the end user requirements. As I said, there are different end users, and all of them, they have a different requirements. So no point to develop one system to meet all these requirements. As I said, in some cases, a simple aeroscope system from DJI will be sufficient, but in many cases it's not, and you need to have a special custom-made system. What we also know, what the technology never stops, and the bad guys are usually the first one to employ the new technology against you. So we are always catching up with them. So we were conducting the continuous analysis of the new technologies, what are coming up to the market, and we are actually implementing them in our systems as well. And very often in these attacks, it's not one agency will be acting, but maybe a multiple. So there is also the issue of the coordination between the different agencies. And again, we are providing some recommendations how this could be done in the most efficient way, assuming what the agencies already have some sort of system in place. So the counter-UAS system should be integrated into existing solutions rather than opposite, rather than existing systems should be adapted to the new counter-UAS. What we also did, we actually looked to all the terrorist cases, what been done through with the drone help, and we have a huge library of these cases. And finally, one of our outcomes, what we did, we've developed a counter-UAV training program. And this training program is, again, it's a customized, and it's for the different end users. We provide a different level of training. And the training is quite comprehensive. It includes the technical part of the training, describing the drones and the counter-UAV technologies, the different sensors, advantages and disadvantages for each of the sensors. But the significant part of the training is dedicated to regulations. Simple questions, like in many countries, the jamming is not legal. Even police cannot use the jammer. So what do you do with the drone flying towards you and your critical infrastructure, and so on? And there is also new regulations are coming up. So slowly, so we are helping the law enforcement agency to understand these new regulations and to modify their procedures accordingly. And the output of our project, which will be in a few months, will be a training program. It will be a handbook for the law enforcement agencies, describing what all the tools and what to do and how to manage these tools. We also work with quite a few law enforcement agencies to develop the coordination strategy. And we are also putting the trainers program, because we cannot go anywhere in the world and start training. So we are providing this training for trainers, where people who attend our training program, they will be doing the consecutive trainings to their colleagues. And we are developing, and it will be live soon, a counter-UAV online training portal, where more or less everywhere they can go and look through the slides, look through the training, and pass maybe even some mock tests and the mock exams, to get a better understanding of all the issues related to this. And I cannot say and thank Mark, so you mentioned this book, but Arctic has also asked us to promote the book. So I use the chance to do a little bit of promotion. So this is our book. It was published a few months ago, and we really enjoy doing it, and we like doing it. So hopefully you will like it, not at least as much as we, but hopefully you will like it. And that completes my presentation, and thank you very much. We'll be happy to take questions.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Garek. We appreciate it. And I'm getting a little bit of feedback on my mic. That seems about okay. Awesome. So I'll ask you some questions if that's okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Brilliant. This question says, are there any catch-all procedures where mitigation might be banned, such as jammers, but it should be used to save lives illegally if required?
It's a very good question. The answer is it depends in which country. In some cases, a decision is made by the commanding officer. So he will have to look into the situation. And it's again, if it is a drone which flies just with the camera, it is like paparazzi drone, probably he will be in trouble if he applies this. But if it is a drone carrying something what you don't know and starts spraying or dropping something, then yes, he could be excused. I know the few cases where the Counter-UAS system, like a jamming system, were installed in prisons to protect the bringing contraband by drones. And actually, the officer who was responsible for this decision, he had, let's say, some issues, and we've been asked a lot of questions of why he is using jamming, because legally he is not allowed to, even though it is for the obvious, very good reasons. So it's a gray area. Let's put it to answer this question. It's a gray area.
And I guess that's something that the DroneWise project might be
Yeah.
trying to figure out and have a standard operating procedure for. Okay.
Yeah.
And another question says, how different is the terrorist threat to public spaces per country? How do you quantify it per different country?
I guess it also should be linked to the terrorist level in this country, because, you know, each country has its own terrorist level for the possible attacks and so on. It also should link to the kind of existing regulations about the usage of drones. And I can say in the UK and in the US, it's quite strict. And there are also certain procedures and certain countermeasures in place. So it is possible, but it's much more difficult. The big change in the UK was a couple of years ago, the case with the Gatwick airport, where the whole airport was done, and still people don't know who was flying these drones and who was behind it. So after that, a lot of changes happening. So there is a lot of procedures in place. So it will be quite difficult to do this in the UK. I don't know about the other countries, but the countries what we are working with, they show what they understand the issues. And it's not only they want to buy the Counter-UAS system. They're also working, we are working with the law enforcement agencies on regulation and integration with the procedures. Again, I'm sounding probably wishy-washy, not answering the questions, but these are all the questions with kind of open questions, have no answers.
Sure.
I'm sure you know the answers about what these drones been used actively to attack on the oil processing facilities, to attack like even some heads of states and so on. You've seen probably the video where the drone was flying, illegal drone was flying above Angela Merkel's head. So these things happened, but it happened in the early days. I don't think this will happen now.
Okay, and look, from your experience, I guess, from the DroneWise project, is there any kind of methodology for law enforcement where a counter-UAS system isn't there? You know, what does a typical standard operating procedure look like for them, or what is the first thing they could do if they had no jamming or detection systems?
It's a good question. So if you have no Counter-UAS system and you see the drone flying towards your direction, I guess watch and pray. What can we do?
Right. So maybe something we'll see come out of the project as well.
Yeah, obviously this is not what we recommend in the project. We recommend what, for example, like a different kind of hierarchy of Counter-UAS systems. There should be systems which are permanently installed in critical infrastructure location. There should be systems which could be portable and moved when required. Say, if you have a music festival once a year in this field, you don't have to keep the drone system all the time in there. There should be system during the football matches where the fans are coming and so on, in the airport, obviously. But importantly, the system should not be like a standalone isolated systems. They all should be linked to, in a similar way, like every country has its national counter-missile protect defense system. So the same way they should have eventually the counter-UAV protection system, and this could be probably linked and integrated with the counter-missile system. We even have these discussions ongoing on I mean, everyone accepts what the drones will become a reality of our life. Amazon and Google are the best examples. And we are probably in the stage like we've been, 150 years ago when the first cars were introduced. People were saying, oh, these are dangerous, they will be killing people and so on, but they're still using it. So what we'll require some sort of the rules for the flying the drones. So people who want to fly them legally, they have to comply with the rules. And I know what such regulations for the drones for airfaces in the development. But then, as always, when you have a rules, you need to somehow to impose the rules, and you need to monitor. It's like in the traffic, so basically, like on the road, we have a traffic cameras to control the speed. There will be a counter-UAV system which will be controlling who is flying where. Are you following the altitude and the corridors which are allocated to you, or you're cutting corners and so on? And there will be issues to detect these people, maybe not to shut them down, but to identify, to send a penalty notice, and maybe to remove the licenses and so on. This is coming, this will happen, and I'm proud to say what we are part of this.
Brilliant. No, look forward to it. Garrick, there was a question about one of your slides. If you don't mind, we're going to pull your slides back up. And I think it was the second last page there. It mentioned a coordinated center or coordination project. I think it was, yes, that one. Counter UAV command, control, and coordination strategy. Does that entail bringing together different counter UAS vendors, or is it more law enforcement? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Both. The coordination strategy will be the different law enforcement agencies as well, but also different systems as well. The problem is some of the outcomes of the projects are restricted. I can say what we are doing. Mention what this is what we are doing. It's in the public domain. But for more details, I probably will need to know who is asking the question and can talk directly to them.
Sure. No, that makes sense, and I understand that. So let's focus on the DroneWise project itself. What do you think, if you're the best person to answer this, what do you think was the biggest learning outcome of doing the project in terms of something that kind of changed the perception before starting it?
I can tell personally what was the major difference for me. Coming from the technical background, I was thinking what the technology is everything. And I was thinking, for example, what increasing, let's say, the detection range by another 500 meters or classification accuracy and so on, it's the most important thing. Apparently, it is important, but it's not the most important. The most important thing is to make sure what the end users, people who will be using it, they are happy with the system. So they accepted the system, and the system could be easily incorporated into their procedures. So they don't need to retrain all their stuff. They don't need to change their procedures. It's very similar. We have similar experience, like when you bring the new medical devices into hospital. And one of the key factors of success is how much medical personnel and the nurses like your device or not. You may have the best technology in the world, but if the nurses don't like it and they found it difficult and so on, it probably will not fly. So the same here. So we had to change our focus from kind of polishing and increasing the performance and so on, and as a result, sacrificing on the user-friendly applicability to do it opposite. So we want to make it user-friendly, more integrable with the existing procedures. And if it takes, let's say, slight degradation in performance, then so it be. So that's, for me, was the main outcome from this.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay.
Because
And
technically, the customer is the king. So whatever customer needs, we have to do this, rather than as an engineers to tell them this is what you have to do.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Okay, and look, we might give you just one more question that we have before you head off. So, look, this question is about Counter-UAS evaluation, and we have a speaker coming up very soon next to look at how we can evaluate the actual effectiveness or the transparency of how a system works well. Within the DroneWise project, you talk a little bit about getting them trained on Counter-UAS systems. Is there any appetite for that evaluation of systems, or how they can evaluate them themselves?
This is actually, I would say, it's the huge appetite, and not only from the end user, but from us as well. Because if possible, I will definitely watch this video, the next presentation about the evaluation, and will be good. I probably will get in touch, because we probably even will integrate it into our training program, this evaluation thing.
Okay, so something that's definitely on your radar.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Brilliant, Garrick. Well, appreciate you coming and talking with us today. Thanks again for taking the time, and we wish you all the best. And hopefully see you again at another GDSN.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys, and best of luck for your project.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Cheers.
So to everyone else, we have a bit of a time before the next speaker comes up, so feel free to go and grab yourself a tea or coffee, and we're going to be just waiting before our final keynote takes place. So we'll have a little bit of time, and we'll be back in a little bit of minutes. Thank you. All right. We are hopping back on for a bit of a conversation and chat before David's talk. So, David, welcome. How are you?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Yeah, perfect. And look, I thought we'd take the opportunity just to have some general banter. We've we've known each other for a while and always got something good to chat about. So, yeah, welcome. And for everyone else kind of watching, we'll actually get to the main talk still on time, so that others can join for it. But we'll fill up the space with some chat. So, David, I think the key one that maybe you won't get to fill in detail is the journey of Ursa and how you've kind of really gone down that startup path through Techstars. Would love for you to dig into that a little bit and kind of tell the journey on how you've pivoted or changed as time has gone on and as innovation in drones has changed as well.
Absolutely. And you and I actually have followed a somewhat similar journey, though our timing is a little bit different. But we both started from a cybersecurity background. And I think that cybersecurity underpins an enormous amount of what is going on in the area of drones and autonomous systems and all the things that work with them, either to counter them or support them. And various people that we know or that are attending this conference are coming at it from different perspectives. My personal perspective was doing both digital forensics and incident response for Ernst & Young a number of years ago. And that gave me some really strong insights into how to collect information from an individual device, mobile phone, laptop, or whatever, but also an entire ecosystem, which was the incident response aspect of it. But it also taught me a lot about threat intelligence, figuring out what the adversary's objectives were, and that helped to inform what our defensive measures were and our response measures and things like that. So that's kind of my background. 5 years ago, well, actually, while I was still at EY, I looked at drones and I said, you know, these things are really cool. How do I apply what I'm getting paid to do to this thing that I want to do? And it really was, okay, how do we extract information from these things if we need to go analyze them? So I started working on UAV forensics. If you look at my SANS presentations, I think the first one I did was like 2014 or 2015.
Right.
So yeah, I was very early into it. I'm still very early into it. The demand for UAV forensics is still relatively small. There's some organizations which are doing a really good job. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection for inside the United States is one of the best, has one of the best UAV forensics capabilities within the U.S. government. There's some smaller organizations that are doing it as well, but it's not their main forte. So we have been developing software, actually a SaaS platform that is capable of doing UAV forensics, but there's really not a lot of money there. So to your point, you know, pivoting. So we got into Techstars, which is one of the accelerators. There are a bunch of other ones out there now. Most of those accelerators are designed to help you not necessarily write a really good pitch or run a business. They're really teaching you how to figure out what it is that has value to customers and enough value that they will actually pay you for it. So there's customer discovery and all this other stuff. So we went through Techstars. We discovered that the United States Air Force was actually interested in UAV forensics. Got a fair bit of R&D money out of that. But again, even that request was still too early. There wasn't a lot of demand within the Air Force for doing it. And then COVID hit and a lot of R&D money dried up. A lot of VC money dried up. And so we were really spending time looking around and saying, okay, what else can we do? There were some opportunities to pivot. We were looking at smart cities. Somebody said, can you instrument propane gas cylinders? Because they produce telemetry and we ingest telemetry. That particular company, as a side, just sold their entire business off to a much larger company. So that actually turned out to be a successful effort, but just not one that we wanted to do. We stayed with it. We stayed within the sort of defense law enforcement community, and where we've pivoted to, though it's really not a strong pivot, is looking at counter-UAS data, and really trying to do it as you do and others in this sort of consulting space do it from an unbiased third-party perspective. And I think that,
yeah, I was going to touch on that. What does that mean in this industry, and what has your experience been so far as an unbiased third party?
So this comes, this perspective, unbiased third party, and actually trusted usually gets involved in that statement. It's usually a trusted, unbiased third party. And EY and the other big consulting firms, this is one of their foundational principles, and it's one of mine. I think it's one of yours as well. The vendors obviously have a particular perspective on what they are bringing to the table, and they are trying to sell and promote their product. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's their business. The customers have a particular bias. It may be because somebody's in the organization that favors something. It may be for a variety of reasons. My experience from EY and working on this now is that there is a great demand for companies such as ours and yours that understand both the how to work with the customer and understand the customer's needs for systems to do forensics or counter-UAS or cybersecurity, and who can also understand the various vendors' capabilities at a level of detail that allows that consulting firm or that particular tool that does this sort of work to properly represent not just the vendors to the customers, but also the customers to the vendors. And it's really important to maintain that unbiased aspect. Once you're perceived as having some particular favoritism towards a particular vendor, and particularly a financial incentive, then whatever recommendations you make pro or con for that vendor or any other vendor are now colored by that particular financial benefit or other benefit. And so walking that fine line and being somebody that people in the industry can come to and say, hey, look, what do you think about either this use case or this particular approach to the problem or this particular vendor, and being able to answer that in a way that people trust that you're not motivated by anything other than the facts. That's really important.
Yeah, that's a big one, because that might mean short-term income if you can make those vendor relationships or deals, and you get that kickback if you can make a recommendation. But it helps so much more if there is transparency. And we have tested these systems from an independent perspective. We have our own framework. We never get kickbacks from a certain vendor, but we're able to tell you what we think works best, both in your environment or maybe for your geography or for your regulation. And these days, it's so easy to go and look at it from, as even Garrick mentioned before, a technology standpoint and what works best. And then you realize there's so many other factors that regulation might mean a system that's not as technically effective might actually be a better solution for them. Or in some cases, a human standard operating procedure without even having a counter drone system might be the solution. And even in other cases, their budget might not have the required need for something else they can do. So we see that all the time. And look, I think there's one question that comes to mind, because yourself, you come from EY. I was working at BAE Systems previously, and my question is, why do you think this has to be a boutique or a niche sector for some of these firms? Why aren't all the big four, the big guys, currently doing this type of work yet? Is it just still emerging, or do you think there's something else to it?
I'm actually in conversations with one of the big four about taking what we're doing and providing it through them. So I have been trying to talk to the various big four for the last 5 years. I don't think there was a sufficient revenue stream associated with this type of work to interest them. You've been in the similar positions I have. It's like and nothing against the big four or other consulting firms, but there's a certain threshold of revenue required for them to actually engage anything. And this has not been a sufficient problem to generate that level of revenue. The particular firm that I'm talking to now is looking at U.S. federal government contracts. Those have the potential of generating the revenue that will drive this type of demand. The other thing is, sort of on the demand side, what we are talking about is really sort of a startup space problem. There are people such as you and I that are passionate about understanding how UAVs and counter-UAS systems work. And so we're willing to invest sweat equity into making something of this. We are out there on the cutting edge. And now that we have done that, and the industry is now saying, okay, there's a demand for unbiased third parties that understand how these systems can be deployed and operated, and that there's sufficient volume of UAVs out there that are both normal, hobby, or commercial, but also behaving in a malicious manner. Now there is interest coming up on those large consulting firms saying, hey, wait a second, our customers are now asking us, can we provide this service? And so I think that over the next 4 or 5 years, and probably even sooner, we're going to see autonomous systems and UAVs and counter-UAS programs within some of the larger consulting firms. But based on my experience at some of these firms, I think that some of the best capabilities will still come out of boutique firms such as yours and ours, because we are laser focused on this. And one of the problems that the consulting firms have is that when the team that is working on a particular problem area doesn't have work to do, they don't want those people sitting on the bench. They want them generating revenue. And so they will get tasked with doing something else. And then they aren't keeping their skill set up. Whereas you and I and other firms such as ours, if there's a quiet time, we're going to be out doing research. We're going to be out giving presentations. We're going to be out making sure that we are keeping our capabilities fresh, keeping up with the latest research and things like that.
Yeah, it's actually funny you say that, because this is the first GDSN that I myself haven't given a talk. And, you know, it is something where you go to give a presentation and you start a research hypothesis, and you end up not just with a talk, but some new research and something that you've developed and found along the way. And sometimes it'll end up becoming a type of framework or something that you can use off. So I get that. And I think what you call bench time in a consultant company usually ends up being R&D time in a startup. And look, I want to touch on that point, because this is something, you know, where drones and counter drones isn't just your typical cybersecurity, where you can have a civilian approach, let's say. There is a large military style of theme with counter drones. So when you come from a startup compared to a company, perception matters a lot. So in your own journey, how many times have you had to try and give off the perception of not a startup versus the benefits of a startup being, you know, agile and elite and you know, that kind of thing? Can you talk me through that a little bit?
That's a huge challenge, and there are people in the ecosystem that I came up through that are addressing this as a nonprofit alliance, because while the Department of Defense, the U.S. Department of Defense, is really trying to be innovative and accept and embrace innovation via startups, they have a real hard time doing that. And so oftentimes they want to look at a well-established firm, and because they know that they've got 100 years of experience, they've got all the administrative support and things like that. And so it's a real challenge to walk that line. I think it's crucially important in the space that we're working in, that we're talking about, and that the audience is here for, to be innovative. The counter-UAS systems are rapidly evolving because the threat is rapidly evolving. And that threat comes not just from the malicious actors figuring out how to better use it, but it's coming from academia, it's coming from the commercial world, it's coming from the hobbyists, because these are dual-use tools. So as much as Raytheon or BAE or Lockheed Martin or whatever would like to say that they're innovative, their innovation is over like 5-year chunks, whereas a typical startup is innovating in sometimes weekly, but monthly or 6 month time period. And if a law enforcement firm, a law enforcement agency or the DoD or a consulting firm comes to us and says, hey, we like what you're doing, can you adjust it to go solve this particular use case? We have the experience and we have the administrative support to very rapidly say, yes, we will go produce a proof of concept for you and then work with you on sort of like an agile model where we start moving that forward on a weekly basis to get where you want to do. And your typical large DoD contractor just cannot innovate at that speed. And if we want to keep up with the threat actors, we need to innovate. And you've seen this in cybersecurity also. It's got to move at very quick pace.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, you talk about solving problems or finding out what some of those problems are. You mentioned before about the US Customs and Border Control, how they're doing pretty good at say, forensics. Now, I won't get you to say anything sensitive or classified there, but if they're great at forensics right now, what are still the main problems they're facing? Obviously, your field is evaluation, but what are the other problems that they're still unsolved that maybe there are other startup possibilities out there?
I think the biggest problems that the government entities have are actually not problems that startups can solve, unfortunately. There are two big aspects. One is procurement. Their procurement models sometimes require 6 months or a year to get from, hey, we like your idea, to here's the money, let's get started on it. And the other one's regulatory. There is a demand for counter-UAS. I'm just going to, there's clearly a lot of malicious UAV activity on the southern border. Our national ability to detect, track, neutralize, investigate those malicious UAVs is greatly hampered by the regulatory environment in which we're operating domestically. If you're operating in a war zone where there's a declared war and the combatants on either side of it are very clear, then your ability to deploy counter-UAS systems is much easier. Doing that domestically in Australia and Germany and the United States or whatever, the regulatory environment has got to catch up with the demand for these systems. And we have not yet seen the compelling event as it is that says we really need to be able to deploy effective counter-UAS systems because this bad thing happened, but we're going to get there at some point.
Okay.
So I wish that startups could solve the procurement and regulatory problems. I think that the other ones that startups are already working on are, better SDR, better software-defined radios, artificial intelligence, machine learning, visualization, all the sort of stuff that we're working on already.
Okay. And look, I think we've still got time for one more question before we go on. And this one's more close to my heart, but I know we've discussed it a few times. And that's around, threat intelligence, right? So there's a key idea that more sharing, just like your cyber threat intelligence, of incidents or reports, say nationwide or to a central governing body, could in fact aid and enrich counter-UAS systems in the way they're focusing on what's next. Now, it can be very hard to get counter-UAS vendors to provide that information to a central body, or for their clients to actually sign off on allowing that data to be shared. It's not like we've got a standard framework like STIX or TAXI or something like that. So if I were to ask you what you see in terms of the future, do you see counter-UAS vendors and their clients being made mandatory to share drone incidents and detection? And if so, what do you think that will look like?
I think that is probably one of the biggest challenges facing us. And I'm really glad you brought it up. I do work for Interpol. I do work for I'm in conversations with a couple of UN agencies about things around this space, but also work with local law enforcement, federal law enforcement. They all really need to have a broad perspective of what's going on with malicious UAVs. And you are doing a really good job of trying to get some of that information out there. But you've also hit on the problem is that the vendors and oftentimes their clients don't want that information published. Sometimes for very good reasons, if sometimes if that information is published, it might incentivize other malicious actors to say, oh, wait a second, we should also be targeting this thing. And I have a great deal of respect for all the counter-UAS vendors. I think that they are working in a very difficult industry. The revenue streams are not matching up with expectations, all of that. They're all putting out very interesting, capable products. But they, for valid business reasons, do not want to share how effective or not effective their systems are with anybody. That includes their customers, it includes their potential customers. They don't want that. They would like everybody to understand how effective their systems are, but they really don't want anybody to understand how ineffective their systems might be. And so that sharing is very difficult. But we also see this in all the federal governments all over the world. You know, there are stovepipes where one agency has information and they don't want to share it with another one. So I think there's two sets of problems. I think that there needs to be some mechanism established, and it would be like an ISAC, most likely, where there's a trusted, unbiased third-party organization where people in that industry, oil and gas or whatever, share threat intelligence amongst themselves to better support their industry. And so build it up so they're mutually supporting their own industries, and then build some umbrella over top of that, which then gets possibly anonymized threat intelligence out of those ISACs and moves that up to the federal level. Within the federal governments and local governments, and trying to get law enforcement to share with military, and you know, I think there's 15 intelligence agencies in the United States alone at the federal level. Solving that problem, that's beyond you and me, not our gig.
At a higher level.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so David, we're right on time. So what I might get you to do is use the share button on in StreamYard to get your slides ready, so that we can place them up on screen very soon. And we'll kick off to everyone else that's just tuned in. We'll kick off in about 30 seconds or so. So appreciate the chat as well, as we've been able to do. And David, let me know if you have any issues sharing your slides.
Can you see it now?
Not so much yet. Maybe, so using the share within StreamYard.
I thought I had.
There we go. I can start to see it on the screen. And
There
we've
we
got
go.
it. So what I'll do is I'll hop off screen, but look, I really appreciate the chat. And again, appreciate you coming on again for the GDSN. And we're really grateful to have you as our keynote, as we always have. And just appreciate the time. So thanks so much, and go ahead and kick off.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed participating the last time that we did this. And you've got a great set of presenters, and you've got a great audience, and that the opportunity to engage in conversations with peers and with people that are facing these challenges is tremendously valuable. None of us are experts in, well, we are experts to a point, but none of us have learned everything that we need to know. We are constantly learning, and some of that comes from the sort of research and development that you and I were talking about, but a lot of it comes from conversations. And we were talking about that trusted third party. We were also talking about intelligence sharing. Participating in opportunities such as this, and in your Slack channel and via your platform, is a really great opportunity for everybody who's interested in these problems and contributing to solving these problems to have a voice and to help each other learn. And so really excited about that, and very appreciative of everybody who's participating. If you just joined us and missed the first 15 minutes just a minute ago, my name is David Kovar. I founded and run a company called URSA, and URSA stands for Unmanned Robotic Systems Analysis. Our focus is on making sense of the behavior of unmanned systems, and in particular UAVs. That's my phone number, that's my email address. This deck will be available at the end of the presentation. There's a URL in here that goes to a series of blog posts that I did on this topic. So everything that you're about to see, you're going to get all these slides, but if you go to that URL, you're going to get a lot more information that digs into all the various aspects of what I'm about to talk about. You're welcome to reuse this information. The only thing I ask is that you cite our effort. And if you are interested in having conversations about it, do let me know. I'm happy to engage in those conversations. My background, I've been doing digital forensics and cybersecurity investigations for a very long time now. For those not familiar with the terms, or digital forensics, from my perspective, is about extracting information from individual devices and doing a really deep dive onto that device. Cybersecurity, and particularly incident response investigations, are really about extracting enormous volumes of information from a very large environment. So a Fortune 50 company, for example, things like that. I've done both of those and other cybersecurity related work, and that really helped inform what we're doing now, which is extracting information from individual UAVs or counter-UAS systems, but also extracting information from the very much larger environment. So 50 counter-UAS systems scattered around the United States, and UAVs that are found or otherwise, the evidence is extracted from them all over the world, and bringing all that together to help do trend analysis, threat analysis, all sorts of other things. I've got 5+ years of private sector UAV forensics and analysis. I suspect that puts me in the top, some very small percentage in the world. I've really been looking at doing this stuff for a very long time. There are other people out there that are as good as I am or better. I'm not saying that I'm the best. I'm just saying this is a passion of mine, and I'm very excited and thrilled to be able to participate in the community and doing this sort of work. In the lead up to this, we were talking about trusted, unbiased third parties. That is very important to me and to our firm and to the people I work with. We have a strong desire to understand and to show how systems work, and we try to do this in a supportive manner that does not represent the financial or other interests of any particular party. We've been developing a general purpose telemetry analysis platform for analyzing and visualizing telemetry data. And we can currently extract information from a wide variety of UAVs, from counter-UAS systems, from ADS-B data, which is manned aircraft telemetry, AIS data, which is marine telemetry data, and we're looking at how to intersect that and sort of tell stories of not just how UAVs are operating, but how all of these systems are interoperating and relating to each other. So that's the end of the marketing pitch. What are we here to talk about? Counter-UAS systems are a really big thing, and they have been for probably 5 years now. There's been an enormous amount of VC money invested in them, and in 2019, Bard College did a report saying that there were over 250 counter-UAS products on the market. So that number's only gone up since then. The problem is figuring out which of those systems work, and you have to define what work means, and then you got to figure out, okay, against what threats and in what environment. So you really need to have a formal test and evaluation process that helps guide your procurement process. And so that's the primary thing that we're here to talk about. Given my background, it's important for me to remind everybody that test and evaluation and forensics sit on that same foundation. Both of those efforts really need to understand how the systems are performing and to be able to document that. They're working towards different ends, and they're looking at different data, but they sit on a similar foundation. So I mentioned during the lead up to this that we were way out in front of the bleeding edge of doing UAV forensics when we started. We're out in front of the need for counter-UAS forensics as well. The number of shoot downs or the number of times where counter-UAS systems have interacted with a malicious UAV that has led to some sort of court case or prosecution or whatever is very, very small at the moment. I think it's reasonable to assume that over the next couple of years, as counter-UAS systems start coming online within the military, within law enforcement, but also within the civilian sector, protecting oil and gas and things like that, that we're going to have more opportunities or more cases where there is a counter-UAS involved with a malicious UAV and that it's going to go in front of a judge and a jury. And so when that happens, or before that happens, we need to know how to do forensics, digital forensics, on not just the UAV that was involved, but on all the other systems that were participating in that, so we can tell a full story. So that's why Counter-UAS forensics. If you want to test and evaluate Counter-UAS systems, there's an enormous amount of work involved in generating the data required to do the analysis. The analysis, while very difficult, is just a very small part of a much larger effort. I was just involved on a conversation with some people on a Facebook group that were about to do some Counter-UAS testing that reminded me of this particular point. There's a lot of time and a lot of prep work involved in doing all the logistics, getting the people there, getting everything sited, making sure that there's enough network bandwidth for all the traffic that you're about to do, that you've got real-time communications between all the participating groups, that you've got enough channels available so that everybody's not talking over each other. You need to have a well-documented and practiced set of flight plans, and those flight plans should represent the threat models that you want to test against. And you need to have people who are capable of executing those flight plans over and over again in exactly the same way whenever possible. And you need to have regulatory approval, not just for the Counter-UAS systems, because they may be emitting in certain frequencies, which are, may interfere with other systems in the area, but also for the flight plans. If you think that the threat actor is going to fly within the regulatory envelope, then you don't need regulatory approval for your flight tests. But if you think that the threat actor may come in at 5,000 feet and then drop down on top of your site, that is probably in violation, that particular flight test is probably in violation of the regulatory environment. And so you might want to get a waiver for doing that. So there's an enormous amount of work involved in doing this stuff right. I'm only going to really talk about the data collection analysis part of it. If you're interested in the other aspects of it, let me know. Happy to have conversations about that as well. What are we trying to accomplish? Does your Counter-UAS system do what you expect? The sort of informal way is exactly what I just did. In marketing speak, it's really important that the vendors demonstrate in a quantifiable manner how their systems perform in a variety of environments against a range of targeted flight profiles and over time as the hardware, software, and configurations evolve. And as Mike and I were talking in the lead up to this, this is a sort of information that vendors need to be able to share with people, and that it's very hard to get them to share. I would say to all the vendors, and they know this, but I'm going to say it anyhow, that the more that they are able to share this information in a standardized form, the easier it is for the people doing procurement to say, yes, we understand what your system is and is not capable of it, and it aligns or does not align with our use cases. So a little bit more free-flowing information between on both sides, everybody's got to be a little bit more transparent, is going to help with the procurement process. It's also important to share information from event to event to event. Most of these Counter-UAS systems are based on some sort of computer system, often with a software-defined radio, and there are lots of ways that that hardware and the software evolves over time. So the test that you did 6 months ago in the Arizona desert may be very different than the test that you're doing 6 months later on a Pacific island. But having the information from both of them helps inform the end user and the vendor how these different systems behave in different environments, which is very important to everybody participating. Another way of looking at what we're trying to accomplish is, can we do this? And you're going to say, okay, what is this? This is an analysis of the UAVs track versus, the UAVs track versus where the Counter-UAS system thought the UAV was at any particular point in time. So in the upper left, we're comparing the Counter-UAS's perception, which is the red, versus the TISB track. And the TISB is essentially the ground truth, and we'll get into that. So it shows that the UAV, and I mapped this from the real world into ECEF Cartesian coordinates for doing some stuff. So that's why it looks as it does. So the UAV flew a little bit sideways and then it flew in a straight line, whereas the Counter-UAS system thought that it was wandering around. Upper right is just showing where it was flying in the real world. The lower two charts are on the left bottom. It's a two-dimensional and three-dimensional error over time. Early on in the flight and all the way, it was actually a fair bit of error, 250 meters off. Towards the end of the flight, the error margin was down under 150 meters, and then it got down to around 20 meters. The chart on the right-hand side tells a little bit of that story. As the UAV got closer to the sensor, it got more accurate. And there's a variety of other similar sorts of analysis that you can do. The take-home point here is that you need to be able to do this sort of analysis. And to do this sort of analysis, you need two things. You need to know what questions you want to ask, and you need to gather the information required to go answer those questions. One of the things you need to understand, or you need to agree on, is what does counter-UAS effectiveness mean? In the military, and I'm oversimplifying, so bear with me, counter-UAS effectiveness is essentially, did it stop the threat? There's one or more UAVs coming at us. Did we manage to stop them before they had their intended effect? Whether that's ISR or dropping munitions or whatever, did we stop it? If we did, if the UAV is 1 mile out and has been blazed or somehow or other stopped, then the system was effective and the nuance is less important. As Mike and I were talking in the lead up again, in the civilian space or when you're not on the battlefield, there's a lot of other factors that come into play that help determine what counter-UAS effectiveness means. Some of those things that affect on our rules of engagement. The U.S. military, within the ground bounds of the United States, has very different rules of engagement than they do if they're in a war zone. The regulatory environments are very restrictive, and Mike and I were talking about that in the lead up as well. We have counter-UAS capabilities in the United States that would enable us to stop a lot more UAVs coming across the southern border if we had the regulatory approval to do so. Or they would have the capability of stopping UAVs flying over a nuclear power plant. And there's a bunch of great articles from an organization called The Drive about UAVs surveilling nuclear facilities for the last couple of years in the United States. We're not able to stop them because of the regulatory environment. We want to collect evidence. We want to go to court with it. If you laze the UAV out of the sky and melt it down to slag, there's not a lot of evidence left. The cost of the systems is a big factor, and the fact that we're operating in non-battlefield conditions. So all these go into determining what the effectiveness of the counter-UAS system is. I'm going to talk through this slide, but I think it's really important that if you're interested in this topic, pick up my presentation, read through the slide, and if you're doing tests or thinking about doing tests, or you just want to understand what the counter-UAS systems are capable of doing, read through all these points and really internalize them and talk them over with the people that you're working with, whether it's your team or the vendor or whatever, so you're all on the same page about what these terms mean. This is a great thing to do around a tabletop exercise. It's a great team building exercise and also really important for accomplishing before you go off and start doing selection. The first one is detection. So what does it mean to detect the UAV? This is a pretty good definition. It's like when the counter-UAS system reports that there's an object, and it says, and I want to emphasize that it includes birds and commercial planes in its view as a detection. It detected something out there, and that's it. The next step helps refine what that it is and starts getting into the countering part of it. So once you detected it, and you could have, I've got radar images where there's one UAV and there are flocks of birds around it. So there's an enormous number of detections, but there's only one UAV. Classify. So once you detected it, the Counter-UAS system, with or without support from its operator or other systems, determines that the detection is a small UAS. So it may be that the operator is sitting there with a pair of field glasses and looking out along the bearing that the Counter-UAS system says, and looks out and sees it's a UAV coming in. That's still classification. We're not saying it's got to be classified by the Counter-UAS system. It does need to be classified before you move on to the next step. There are a lot of Counter-UAS systems out there which are integrated systems. So you've got a RF detector, an acoustic detector, and then you've got some sort of optical system that is slewed along the bearing to look at where the other system is saying there's a detection out here, and the optical system, using some sort of visual analysis, or even the human looking at this image, says, oh, okay, that is a UAV. So classification needs to happen. It is really important to locate that object in space. If you're defending your perimeter, you're a prison or a nuclear facility or whatever, your rules of engagement, your response plan, all that depends on where exactly is this incoming object. Is it 3 miles out and holding steady? It may not be a threat, or it may be doing ISR. Is it coming in at 200 miles per hour, 10 feet off the 10 meters? Sorry, we're national goal. 10 meters off the deck, and coming directly at us. That helps guide us towards what's the intent here. One of the sort of truths of doing test and evaluation is that if your bearing to the UAV is off by 5 degrees at 3 miles, that's a lot less important than if you're off by 5 degrees at 50 feet. So that's one of those analysis parts, is like, if you just say, okay, the accuracy in terms of bearing accuracy is 5%, that's great, but you need to know whether it's 5% at what different distances to really put that 5% into context. So that location and getting the accuracy of that location is more and more important as it gets closer in. The location could be a 3-dimensional point, lat, long, out. It could be a circle or sphere, so it's somewhere within this sphere. It could be a line of bearing. Radar generally produces azimuth and elevation, or other forms. So understand the accuracy, but also understand what that location is. Track is basically a compilation of location reports over a period of time. Make sure that the track consists of only the location reports for the same object, and so you're not confusing objects together. The second sentence in that definition is important. Tracks can be displayed as a line or a sequence of dots. The lines are really pretty. There's 2 big problems with using displaying a track as a line. The first is the classic 2 points make a straight line. If you only have 2 detections and 2 locations, and they span 5 miles, you're going to have this beautiful straight line that shows that the UAV was flying in a straight line for 5 miles. If you switch that from a line to a sequence of dots, you will then immediately understand that what you have is only 2 detection points, and you wonder what the heck was going on in between those points. So keep in mind how you're visualizing the data, because certain types of visualization will cause the observer to come to conclusions that you may not want them to come to, or that actually work against your ultimate objective. I think that it's important for people to deploy counter-UAS systems, even if they don't mitigate. Understanding what's going on in your airspace, understanding what the threats are, understanding all that sort of stuff is important. So if your counter-UAS system only does detect, classify, locate, and track, then that's pretty good unto itself. However, if you want, ultimately, you're going to want to mitigate. And so there are a variety of forms of mitigation. You can negate it, you can interdict it, you can neutralize it, you can destroy it, you can send it home. All of these things are a form of mitigation. It's really important to be able to identify the point at which the Counter-UAS system was actually mitigating the UAS from accomplishing its mission. If the Counter-UAS system says we are now jamming the UAV, you might say that's the mitigation. But if the UAV continues on its course for another 30 seconds before that jamming actually has an effect on it, both those points are important. When the mitigation effort started is important, but when the mitigation effort actually took effect is also very important. So when you're doing mitigation, make sure you're tracking both of those. If we say a system detected UAS, most of us will understand it. But it's also important to understand where all of this information is presented. It could be in a log file, a user interface, audible alert, what was detected, all these things. So understanding, okay, we detected it is important. Understanding how that communication is conveyed to the observer or the operator, but also to the system doing the recording is also very important. So agree on the terms, understand what they mean, understand how that information is communicated. I mentioned TSP pucks, TSP devices. TSP stands for time, space, position, information. So it is a device that's assigned to accurately and sometimes very accurately record where that device is in time, in space, and also its position, sometimes orientation. For Counter-UAS testing, it's a definitive source of truth on which everything else depends. All of these UAVs have their own log files, which show where they are. You can get them from DJI, you can get them from Pixhawk. All of them record this information. A couple problems. One is sometimes it's hard to get that information off. DJI encodes and makes it difficult to get the log files off. But the other problem with them, two other problems with them, are related to the fact that that position information oftentimes isn't terribly accurate. I've seen multiple sources of position information in a DJI aircraft essentially disagree with each other because some of it comes from the barometric sensor, some comes from the GPS, some comes from sort of predicting where it's going to be. All that stuff is challenging, and also the GPS may not be terribly accurate. So having an external source of truth that's mounted onto the UAV to collect this information, I think, is really important. If your GPS on board the aircraft is only accurate to 40 meters, then any conclusion you come to about how accurate the Counter-UAS system can never be more accurate than 40 meters. The other problem is that if you're jamming the UAV system, then all of its time, space, position information, it becomes suspect as soon as that effect starts coming in, as soon as the Counter-UAS system starts having an effect on the UAV. This is one of those reference slides. If you're interested in TSP pucks, and by the way, there are not a lot out there. We developed a prototype for the U.S. Air Force, and we're working on getting funding for a production model. This is just some notes on what you're looking for in a TSP device. It needs to be fundamentally. Oftentimes, once you do a test, you don't have an opportunity to recreate it. You can't fly the aircraft again. There are other aircraft you need to fly. The vendors need to leave. Whatever. If you don't collect this information correctly the first time, getting it again later is hard. So making the TSP device as fault tolerant as possible is really, really important. It should be sufficiently weather resistant and impact resistant to survive the normal operating environment. If you're going to shoot the UAV down and it's going to fall to Earth from 3,300 meters, the TSP puck should survive it. You should have a real-time data link when possible, which helps mitigate the problems of shooting it down, but still make it fault tolerant, make it physically robust. That's most of those first set of bullet points. It's got to be accurate. It's got to be in some sort of common format. It's got to be trusted. You want to reduce the SWAP. SWAP stands for size, weight, and power. I won't bring it up. I've got a really bad TISP puck with me. It was very large. It had an impact on the flight performance of the UAV. It increased the radar cross section. You want to do as little as possible to affect the flight characteristics and the physical characteristics of the UAV that you're mounting on this on. The power should be independent of the target. You don't want to draw power from the target either. Whenever possible, provide a real-time downlink. That means that you're getting the data. It provides you with situational awareness, which is really helpful from running these sort of things. But also, if the TISP puck ends up in the river or it gets lazed or whatever, you still get the data. So that's important. The data link should not interfere with or be affected by the Counter-UAS systems involved in the exercise. If you have a 933 megahertz control frequency and you're using the same 933 megahertz frequency for downlinking your data, and somebody jams that link as a part of the mitigation, you just lost your data connection, your TISP link connection as well. Human observers. We want to fully automate Counter-UAS test and evaluation because humans are error prone. Converting analog data, my speaking or my writing notes down into digital form is hard, but it's really important when doing this sort of stuff. There's a lot of information that's not available or not recorded by the electronic sensors. Seeing the UAV wobble in flight, for example, when the mitigation takes effect, is an important thing to note because it may not get captured in the digital data or it may be hard to get to. Recording when the audible alert is put out on for the operator is important. Viewing the user interface for the Counter-UAS is important. And it's not in here, but it's in the long form blog post. I would recommend that if you've got Counter-UAS system displays, that if at all possible, you do a video capture of that. Because then when you've got questions about what was the observer seeing 2 months later when you're doing the data analysis, you can go look at the video and say, okay, this is exactly what was going on. So worth keeping in mind. That's where the human observers come in. They can help us answer how many UAVs were actually in the air. I was participating in an exercise where there was a lot of confusion about how many UAVs were actually available to be detected by the Counter-UAS system. Get the humans to record this and do it accurately. Which TISP puck was on which aircraft? That's very important to know which track was going with it, which aircraft. What aircraft went in the river? Did the Counter-UAS system detect the UAV, mitigate? All this sort of stuff is information that's really important to have a human also record and capture in some sort of digital form. Counter-UAS data sources. There are a lot of sources. And which source you want to use for Counter-UAS test and evaluation and forensics depends on a lot of different factors. And I'm not going to tell you that one is best for your circumstances. You're going to need to figure out, based on what you're trying to accomplish, your resources you have available, which one of these sources you want to work with. The 4 primary data sources are the vendor log files. So these are computer systems. They are generating voluminous logs. If you've done incident response or digital forensics, you're familiar with this. This is very high fidelity information. It's logged in real time, but it's not available in real time. It's really poorly documented. Some engineer is going to add some new log message, and if it gets documented, it's months later. And so subject matter expertise is often required to really understand these log files. However, it's a really great source of information. Most of the vendors have APIs, application programming interfaces. You can tie into that and get a lot of real-time information from the system. It's vendor curated in the sense that the vendor is presenting to the client, the software client, information in a form and only the information the vendor wants to share. But that is really the information you're probably looking for doing test evaluation. It is done in real time, which is really important. It is transient though. So if you want to preserve the information that's available via the API, you, the test and evaluation people, should log it and preserve it. That API is well documented, it's user-friendly, all that sort of stuff. So in general, if you can tie into this, that's the best option. Developing a client for doing all the logging using the vendor's API does require software engineering, test, and validation of that process. So it's non-trivial to get right. There's a sort of standards discussion to have around that. The vendor user interface is incredibly highly curated. The vendor is defining the experience and what information is shared and how it's shared. It's real time. It is transient. If you want to preserve it, you've got to do a video recording of it. And it's the ultimate user experience. As I said, preserving this information to understand what the user experience is really important. It may turn out that in the vendor log files, it says, we detected, we classified, we tracked, and we mitigated, but none of that information may have gotten to the user interface. And so ultimately the system failed because the operator didn't get that information. So if you have the resources available, combining those two things together gives you a much better context. Standard and proprietary integration layers are where I think that if we want to do standardized Counter-UAS test and evaluation at scale, we should do. There are in the US two major command and control layers. One's FAD C2, the other one's Medusa. Basically, these are very, very well designed and standardized ways for various sensors to communicate with each other and with control systems. And so if all of your sensors can participate in one of those layers, and you can pull the information out of that, it's probably the best source of information because those standards make sure that all the data is normalized. It makes sure you're getting all the same information from all the sensors, all that sort of stuff. If you're playing at the DoD level, that's easy. If you're doing sort of working down the consumer commercial level and in the sub $100,000 sensor level, it's probably a little bit harder. Hopefully that will change as we evolve. Counter-UAS systems generate enormous volumes of data. A lot of it is of no interest to many of us, and different use cases will really determine what data you're looking at. Depending on what you're trying to accomplish, which of those four you choose is likely to be obvious. The exercise I was working on, we worked with the vendor log files. It was a great experience. It had some challenges. We had to do a lot of normalization, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It's worth noting that the easier it is to obtain the data, the farther you are away from the unvarnished truth. So just keep that in mind. Garbage in, garbage out. I'm going to start moving a little more quickly through this. If your raw data is flawed, there's no hope for meaningful analysis. You probably can't go collect it again. If your data is questionable, if there's doubt about how accurate it is, then the analysts are going to spend a lot of time making sure, getting rid of all those questions. So that's not time well spent. Get it right the first time. If it's poorly organized, you drop it on a thumb drive and you don't upload that thumb drive to the right place, all that sort of stuff, then the data is useless. You've got to make it so it's available to people and that they can trust it. And then there's normalization. If it's not in the same format, units, geospatial reference models, all that, then a lot of resources are required to normalize it before any meaningful analysis is done. So get the normalization right at the outset. Data normalization, to really compare this information, and we saw why we want to compare it. We want to compare where the Counter-UAS system thought the target was versus where the target really was. We must use common frames of reference. There are simple ways of doing this. There are very sophisticated adjustments. The effort is to bring in the common frame of reference. At a bare minimum, you should use the same time zones. I recommend UTC. And reference model WGS84, lat long altitude for physical locational participating systems. It's worth noting that radar systems will not generate lat long altitude. They'll generate bearing and elevation. So you need to have some way of converting that information into that common frame of reference. This is a slide that you should pick up the deck afterwards and digest. It's talking about all the data collection steps. On the left side, it's what we had to do before the event even kicked off. In the middle, it's all the data collection that we did during the event. And then there was all the data collection after. So there's a lot of different elements of data collection that we had to get right for everything to come together correctly. And so this is part of the prep work, but this is also part of the, if we get better at sharing what worked for one exercise with other people, then the next exercise will be easier to do and will generate better data. So this is the sort of thing that we can all collaborate on and help everybody else get better at. Data visualization. Excel is not just does not scale. That's a great starting point. You can also drop things into Google Earth. There's a lot of ways you can get some basic analysis out of this stuff. But if you want to test 10 different systems over a period of a week and then take those results and compare it to a similar exercise done in the Pacific Islands 6 months later, you need to do this at scale. You need to apply good software engineering to it. You need to put program and process around it. So there's a lot of work involved. I mentioned this data visualization. This is a very simple form of it. This was done with Python. You can use MATLAB. You can use a lot of things. The take home here, though, is that I've worked with people that kept sharing a lot of conclusions via Excel spreadsheets and pointing at various cells and saying, this means that the system did this at this time. For the person doing the analysis, that probably makes sense. For everybody else who's looking at that Excel spreadsheet on the screen, it's noise. There's no way of following along with what the person's talking about. We're visual learners, and putting the information into well-designed graphs is important. Anybody can produce a bad graph. Spend some time doing some discussions with people about how you want to visualize the data so it's actually representing and telling the story that you want to tell. Comparing Counter-UAS track data, I mentioned most of this stuff. Ultimately, what we want to do is compare the Counter-UAS perception to where the UAV was. This is relatively straightforward. If you've normalized everything, if you haven't, it's essentially impossible. Google Earth works. Plotting error over time and distance is relatively straightforward. So as much as I am trying to push us all towards a standardized automated system, you can use Google Earth, you can use Excel for getting some pretty good understanding of how systems did not work. So the takeaways that I want to leave you with, that's the definition of a takeaway. Figure out what your use cases are. Are you going to be able to mitigate a UAV? If not, then you don't even need to worry about the mitigation step, or you can choose to deprioritize that. What's the threat? You know, is somebody trying to deliver contraband into your prison? Is somebody trying to do ISR surveillance over your nuclear reactor? You know, what are the threats you're trying to counter? And make sure that you are selecting systems and generating test cases and generating flight profiles that align with what your use cases are and what you perceive your threat will be. And bear in mind that those evolve. Test and represent an environment. So if you are putting a nuclear reactor on a Pacific island, I guess there's some benefits to doing that. I'm not too sure who's going to be consuming your energy. Testing the systems in a mountainous environment or a desert environment isn't really going to be relevant. Similarly, if you've got clear sight lines out for 5 miles, then your detection ranges are going to be different, and you may be able to use different sensors. So talk through whiteboard, tabletop exercise, all that sort of stuff. Make sure that everybody's on the same page in terms of what you're trying to test, what the threat is, what the environment is, and things like that. Select and fly the targets. So there's a period there. So figure out what, again, based on your threat model and your use cases, figure out what the adversary is likely to be flying and figure out how they're going to be flying them. You or somebody working for you or a trusted third party should go through the acquisition and operation of those targets. I have seen tests where the vendor brought a UAV to the test and flew their own flight profile. And the Counter-UAS system worked perfectly. Obviously, that's a little bit rigged. And if you just want a general snapshot of does it work at all, great. But if you want to know if it works in your environment, you need to control the selection and the operation. If you can operate the system, do so. There's a FAA exercise doing Counter-UAS test and validation at 5 different airports in the United States. One of the interesting requirements for it was that the vendors are obligated to install the system and then walk away from it for a month. So the vendor, any detection needs to get to the FAA via the system as it's installed. It's not going to get tweaked on site. It's like, oh, wait a second, we didn't properly adjust the sensor for this operating environment, or we didn't understand that you're going to be using fixed wings. That sort of test is really powerful. There are also times that you want the vendor to evolve on site because doing test and evaluation is great for the vendors to really improve their system. So keep in mind what you're trying to accomplish and what your opportunities are. At a bare minimum, get the vendors to explain how their systems are working and to show you what the user interface is so that you, when information is coming in via the user interface, that you understand it. It's a great opportunity for that sort of information sharing. People travel to the site, take half a day to train everybody on how all the systems work. It's useful. Don't run, if you can avoid it, don't run one exercise with just one vendor. Get as many vendors as you can get to the exercise at the same time. That gives you some opportunities to compare and contrast them. They have intellectual property. You need to give them the opportunity to make sure that the other vendors are not learning how their systems work. So do respect their needs as well as yours. But if you're going to go through all the effort to get multiple vendors there, to get to do the exercise, get as many vendors there as you can reasonably support. Don't let the vendors reconfigure and modify their system during the exercise, parenthesis, without clearly logging it. If they change the nature or the configuration of their system during the exercise and you don't know that, then different results over the course of the exercise may be hard to understand without that context. We had a vendor that changed the orientation of one of their panels, and that had a significant effect on some of the results. So getting that, just make sure that you document it. Collaborate and share. I'm saying don't sign non-disclosure agreements. You're probably going to have to sign non-disclosure agreements. And this goes back to what Mike and I were talking early on. So this is me. Get a hold of me. Since I have a couple extra minutes, I'm going to show you one quick thing that's sort of related to it. There's a variety of counter-UAS systems deployed around Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport and Dallas, Texas. Well, near Dallas and Fort Worth. We have data from those sensors over a month's time. Actually, we have got more than that, but this is looking at data from a month's time. We combine that data with ADS-B data, and what this shows is all of the times that a UAV came within 2,000 meters of a manned aircraft in this particular area. The red dots are within 750 meters. And there are a number of red dots. So this is one of those examples of there is great value in counter-UAS systems, even if all they do is detect, track, and identify. There's no mitigation going on here, but it's helping the FAA and other people who are concerned about the airspace understand what's actually going on so they can make informed decisions, so they can make regulatory decisions. So and understanding how effective the systems are is still important for this. So the take home here is that if you're doing counter-UAS work, there is great value in deploying the systems and sharing the data, as I am doing here, to help everybody understand what's going on. Our result produces this. It's got the call sign of the aircraft, call sign of the UAV, distance, it's data crunching. So that is the end of my presentation. I will stop sharing and turn it back over to Mike.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, David. Just very, very insightful. And even on that last screen, the fact that you can filter it to, the different types of distances that they came within airplanes is so much more important than simply saying we saw a drone because you can actually quantify how many actually dangerous or potential risks. If you have a, let's say, FAA report or investigation that comes out, you can match it up with what actually happened. And, we get all those reports time and time again where someone says, I saw a drone 60 meters below me or 40 meters to the side. But now you can actually put that together and figure out what actually was happening.
Yep. I saw in one of your recent DroneSec reports, there were 3 close approaches. There are actually more close approaches than we're now documenting where those are happening. And so we can now start really taking this sort of analysis and make it available via platforms such as yours, so that people all over the world start understanding what's really going on, rather than this secondhand, potentially flawed human observations and saying this is really what is or is not going on. We will be doing this effort for the US FAA starting in June, covering 30 airports. So it's a tremendous opportunity. And I think it's an opportunity for the Counter-UAS vendors and their customers to make some of this data available for helping the larger community better understand what's going on.
Oh, that's amazing, and good luck with that program, because as we know, here in Australia, Air Services did a gig on 31 commercial airports or aerodromes, and they found in the thousands per month of drones detected around those areas. So the fact that we are reporting, 1 or 2 incidents that are made public is very separate to what is not reported or not seen, or they don't know how to report that. And so you're kind of removing that human in the loop where they rely on someone recognizing it, and you've just got the data to prove it. So that's really awesome. David, I do have some questions, if you don't mind. I know we spoke on length before, but maybe you can short fire some of these, and we'll end up finishing on time. So the first question I had was, who are the potential customers for this type of analysis? And I might actually piggyback it to another one, which is, what is the main incentive for a vendor to undertake these tests? Do they pay, or does the customer pay?
The obvious answer to the first question is that anybody who wants to procure Counter-UAS systems should either acquire this sort of capability on their own, or go to some sort of national or regional flight test facility where this capability is present at that facility. You don't necessarily need to acquire it yourself, but conducting the Counter-UAS testing at a site that has this capability is really helpful and important. So I would say the test facilities would be probably one of the best places to acquire it. I think the vendors might want to acquire this capability themselves, so that they can do their own testing in-house under their own circumstances, so that they can better prepare for the test environment when they get there. So if they have an understanding of how they're going to be tested, then they can spend some time up front making their systems actually perform up to spec before they even get out there. We haven't priced this. I haven't even gotten there. I don't want to get into marketing, but I will say that we want to make this as readily available to people as possible, so that the testing is occurring. We don't want to make this sort of capability so expensive that it's a barrier to getting the work done.
Okay, no, great answer. And look, there's something else here that might segue into that, and it says, you talked about drone forensics. Is that a separate system, or does it fuse the data together with this Counter-UAS forensic log data you're talking about?
Digital forensics is oftentimes a variety of tools that are operated by a human via some sort of well-defined process to bring all the data together and then present it. What we're trying to do, what we are doing and have done actually, is build a platform that does ingest all that data into a single platform and allows you to investigate data from the drone, from the Counter-UAS system, from ADSB, from the manned aircraft, all in one platform. So by all means, I believe that having that unified look into the data makes the process much more robust and much easier to use. But as a digital forensics practitioner, I will say you should validate and test your tools using other things. So even if you were using our platform or something else like that, you should go get other tools and validate the results. And there'll be times that whatever we produced may not solve all the problems. So the answer is you're going to get some of the digital forensics from a couple different sources. There will always be some amount of humans fusing the data together into some platform that allows them to do the final analysis.
Yeah, you don't need to remind me of the benefits of using NCase and FTK to cross-reference results. So from a forensic standpoint, always using multiple tools, and yeah, it's an interesting space. It's not yet crowded for you and this type of product, but maybe in the future. So two quick questions that I'll go through first. The next says, how can well, actually, let's put it in the perspective of a Counter-UAS vendor watching this. How can they make their systems more easier to play with this type of tool in future if this becomes mandatory?
We as a community need to design a standard C2 command and control layer that everybody says we agree to participate in this as low effort to do so. That would define the common formats for representing altitude, bearing, the geospatial reference, WGS84, time zone. It would standardize and normalize all that data, and it would say, here's how you communicate with other participating systems. The Medusa and THAAD C2 is a very robust, and so those are models. But I think that as a community, we could come up with something that was not terribly difficult to implement. So the level of effort required on everybody's part would be relatively low. And that was a standard. And so if you participate in that, then a lot of the problems that I highlighted during this presentation in terms of collection and normalization go away. And now anybody can plug into it and either contribute data to it or pull data out of it.
Okay, brilliant. And the last question here is, what question should a customer who's purchasing a Counter-UAS ask to determine if something like this third-party analysis has been done?
Ultimately, somebody operating this type of system, a test facility or us or whoever, would produce a certified report. So the system would generate some sort of report, and it would have some sort of SHA or some other way of saying it was produced by this system, and the system was configured in such and such a way. And then there would be a sign off by some human saying, I, David Kovar, certify that we use this system for conducting the test at this time. I would also recommend that that report, which says we certify these test results, is linked to some sort of document that explains the test environment as well. So there are national certification, like the FCC certifies that electronic devices only emit in certain frequencies. It would be the same sort of process where there's a recognized mechanism for certifying that the tests were done under these circumstances.
Yeah, brilliant answers, and appreciate the chat we had before. David, just maybe say a last thank you for coming on and helping chat to us about everything and your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for all the great work you and the community is doing.
Pleasure. All right, I'll put up my slide, and that was David Kovar from URSA with his last talk. This really brings us to the end of the GDSN number 3. So as I said, we were very lucky to be able to run this, given that it's COVID and we ran it remotely. But there's been a few people that we have to really thank. Of course, the speakers for their absolute time and effort provided for things like this. Especially those who are returning for the second time. So we appreciate it. We appreciate some of the organizers as well, and some of my team that spent a few hours putting this together. And of course, the Association of Aerospace Industry Singapore that also lent in a great hand to help. So we've had some pretty diverse talks. It's always good to see what's happening new in the industry. We appreciate everyone who stuck around and watched for the time being. So thank you so much. Please go through and put the event feedback form through if you haven't already. And of course, we'll add all the slides so you can view them later on at a separate point in time. So from us and the rest of the Dronesec team, hope you have a great night, rest of your weekend, and see you next time. Goodbye.